Picture two people, both 52. Same job title, same zip code, practically the same paycheck for the last 20 years. One of them has $410,000 sitting in retirement accounts. The other has $190,000, less than half. Now, if you had to bet on who ends up retiring in the top 10% of their age group, you'd bet on the 410 guy, right? Here's the thing, you'd be wrong. 5 years from now, the person with $190,000 retires on schedule, comfortably, ahead of 90% of people his age. And the person with the bigger balance? He's still working at 68, checking his account at 2 a.m., Googling, "Is it too late for me?" I've read enough of these stories now, real surveys, real spreadsheets, people have actually emailed me, to tell you something that sounds almost insulting the first time you hear it. Your balance, the number you keep refreshing, is one of the worst predictors of whether you actually retire well. There are 5 signs that matter more than that number. None of them show up on your account summary page. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly which ones you already have and which one might be quietly costing you a decade. My name is Charles, and I honestly spend far too much time thinking about money. The numbers, but mostly the psychology behind them. I run spreadsheets at odd hours. I've got a folder on my laptop labeled Benchmarks that's embarrassingly large. And for a long time, I believed the same thing you probably believe right now, that retiring well was fundamentally a balance problem. Get the number big enough and you're safe. I ran the actual data a few years back, cross-referenced against a Vanguard study on saver behavior, and it broke that belief completely. The people who retired confidently, on their own terms, without white-knuckling every market dip, they weren't sorted by balance. They were sorted by 5 specific habits. So if you've been quietly comparing your account balance to some number you saw online and feeling behind, stick with me. We're about to replace that anxiety with something a lot more useful, an actual checklist. Here's a stat that stopped me cold when I first found it. The commonly cited "you need $2 million to retire" figure, the one that gets passed around like gospel, it's an average, not a median. And averages in wealth data are almost useless because a small number of ultra-wealthy households drag the average way up. The median, the number where half of people are above and half below, tells a completely different story. For a lot of age brackets, the median retirement account balance is a fraction of that average, sometimes 20% of it. So when you compare yourself to the number, you're often comparing yourself to a mirage built by a handful of outliers. That's not encouragement to save less, to be clear. It's permission to stop panicking about a target that was never realistic in the first place. What actually predicts a good retirement isn't hitting some mythical 2 million, it's these 5 signs. Let's go through them, one at a time, starting with the one almost nobody talks about. Here's a question I want you to actually sit with. Do you know your savings rate? Not your balance, your rate, off the top of your head? Most people can tell you their account total to the dollar. Almost nobody can tell you what percentage of income they're actually saving. And that's backwards, because savings rate is a far better predictor of your future than balance ever will be. The research on this is remarkably consistent. Households saving 15% or more of income, sustained over a couple of decades, land in the top tier of retirement outcomes almost regardless of what the market does in any given year. Households saving under 5%, even the ones with a decent-sized balance today from an inheritance or a lucky stock, tend to stall out. Why? Because a savings rate is a habit, and a balance is a snapshot. Snapshots get lucky or unlucky. Habits compound. If you're sitting at 15 to 20% right now, Even if your total feels small, you are quietly doing something that most people never manage. That's sign one, and it alone tells me more about your decade of retirement than your current balance does. Let's get specific, because vague benchmarks don't help anyone. Based on Federal Reserve survey data, here's roughly where the median American sits by age, and I want you to notice how different this is from the number you've seen in headlines. By your late 30s to mid-40s, the median retirement account balance is somewhere around $60,000. By your early 50s, it climbs to roughly $100,000 to $120,000. By early 60s, the median is somewhere in the neighborhood of $135,000 to $150,000. Compare that to what you've heard you should have, often 3, 4, 5 times that, and you can see the gap between the myth and the median. Here's the sign that matters. If you're meaningfully above these median figures for your age, not the mythical target, the actual median, you are already ahead of a majority of your peers. Not because you hit some arbitrary round number, but because you're outperforming the actual population you're being measured against. That's worth sitting with for a second. You might already be doing better than you think. Here's something I got wrong myself years ago. I moved a chunk of my own retirement savings into cash the week after a bad headline, and I felt very clever about it for exactly 11 days. Then the market recovered, and I'd locked in a loss out of pure fear. The third sign of a top-tier retirement outcome is that your asset allocation is driven by your actual time horizon, not your emotional temperature that week. If you're 50 and everything's sitting in cash or bonds because market swings make you queasy, you're not being prudent, you're quietly starving your own compounding for the 15-plus years you likely still have before you need this money. Conversely, if you're 63, 18 months from retiring, and you're still 100% in stocks because it's always come back before, that's not conviction, that's a sequence of returns risk waiting to happen. The people who land in that top 10% have usually done something unglamorous, a gradual glide path, shifting maybe 1 to 2% toward bonds and stable assets each year as retirement approaches, rather than a dramatic all-or-nothing reaction to whatever the news cycle is doing. Boring, consistent, timeline-driven allocation. That's the sign. This one comes straight out of behavioral finance research, and it's a bit humbling. There's a well-known annual study, Dalbar's Analysis of Investor Behavior, that has shown year after year that the average investor earns meaningfully less than the very funds they're invested in. Not because the funds underperformed, because investors buy high, panic sell low, and miss the recovery. The gap between market returns and actual investor returns has, in some years, been several percentage points annually. Compounded over 20 years, that gap is the difference between a comfortable retirement and a stressful one. So, sign 4 is simple to state and hard to live. Did you leave your allocation alone during the scary years? Not because you're fearless, because you'd already decided in advance what you were doing and why. The people heading toward that top 10% aren't the ones who correctly timed every dip. They're the ones boring enough to do nothing while everyone around them was refreshing their portfolio 5 times a day. If you rode out 2022 or 2020 or 2008 without blowing up your plan, that's not luck. That's a genuine skill, and it's rarer than you'd think. Quick test. Can you say out loud, right now, at what age you plan to claim Social Security, and roughly why? Most people can't, and that's a problem, because the difference between claiming at 62 and waiting until 70 is enormous. Your monthly benefit can be roughly 75% higher just for waiting those 8 years. For a lot of households, that decision alone is worth more than years of diligent saving. The fifth sign of a top-tier outcome is that you've actually run the numbers on this, not vaguely planned to wait, but sat down, maybe with an advisor, maybe with a spreadsheet like the ones I keep at odd hours, and figured out whether bridging the gap with savings to delay claiming makes sense for your specific health, spouse, and asset picture. It's not always right to delay. If you've got health concerns or a shorter family life expectancy, claiming earlier can absolutely be the smarter play. The sign isn't delay no matter what. The sign is that you've actually decided, deliberately, instead of defaulting to whatever age felt vaguely responsible. Let's go back to those two people from the opening. And let me add a third because it makes the point sharper. Person A has $410,000, but a savings rate that's dropped to 6%, an allocation that's ping-ponged in and out of the market twice in 5 years, and no real Social Security plan beyond probably 65, I guess. Person B has $190,000, but an 18% savings rate held steady for a decade, an allocation nobody's touched since it was set up, and a specific claiming age picked out with a spreadsheet. Person C, let's say she's sitting almost exactly at the age median, maybe $120,000 at 52, but she checks 4 out of 5 signs on this list. On paper, Person A looks like the winner. In practice, it's B and C who retire calmer, earlier, and with more room to breathe. The balance is a snapshot of the past. These 5 signs are a forecast of the next 15 years. That's why I keep coming back to them instead of the number on the account summary page. Now, I'd be doing you a disservice if I pretended this was all reassurance. Maybe you just went through this list and you're 2 or 3 or 4 signs short. Here's the honest, non-scolding truth. None of these 5 signs require you to have started 20 years ago. Savings rate is adjustable this month. Allocation is a one-afternoon fix with a target date fund or a conversation with an advisor. Behavior during downturns is a decision you can make right now, in writing, for the next time it happens. Write yourself a letter today saying, "When the market drops 20%, I am not selling," and read it when it happens. And the Social Security decision doesn't need to be made until you're actually near claiming age. You've got time to run those numbers properly instead of guessing. The point of this list was never to make you feel behind. It's to redirect your attention away from a number you can't change overnight and toward 5 habits you absolutely can start shaping this week. So let's bring it together because I don't want you leaving this video with 5 disconnected facts. The actual definition of a top 10% retirement outcome isn't a dollar figure at all. It's a savings rate around 15 to 20%, sustained. It's a balance that beats the real median for your age, which, remember, is far lower than the headlines suggest. It's an allocation that shifts gradually with your timeline instead of your mood. It's a track record of sitting still during the scary years. And it's a deliberate, researched decision about when you'll claim Social Security instead of a default guess. 4 or 5 of those, and the balance mostly takes care of itself over time, because habits compound in a way that single lump sums don't. That's the actual finding underneath all my odd-hour spreadsheets. The boring, consistent behaviors outperform the flashy balance almost every single time. So here's what I'd actually do this week if I were you. Pull up your last 3 pay stubs and calculate your real savings rate, not what you think it is, the actual number. Compare it, honestly, to 15%. Then check your allocation and ask whether it matches your timeline or your temperament. That's it. 2 numbers, 1 afternoon. You don't need to solve all 5 signs today, and you certainly don't need a bigger balance by Friday. You need to know where you actually stand, because I promise you, the version of this that keeps people up at 2 a.m. isn't the math. It's the not knowing. If this helped you see your own situation a little more clearly, stick around, because next time I want to walk through exactly how that Social Security claiming decision changes depending on your specific numbers. And I've got a spreadsheet for that too. Of course I do. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you soon.